From NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, you're watching live coverage of the 12th SpaceX cargo resupply mission to the International Space Station. Hi, I'm Stephanie Martin, and thanks for joining us. Today's launch to the space station is scheduled for 12:31 p.m. Eastern from Kennedy's Launch Complex 39A. At the time of launch, the space station will be flying 253 miles above the Atlantic Ocean, southeast of Nova Scotia. Later in the broadcast, we'll take your questions about the International Space Station and the incredible science happening on board, including one study that aims to solve the medical mysteries behind Parkinson's disease. You can send in your questions on Twitter using hashtag AskNASA. We're about 30 minutes from today's launch. Kennedy's Joshua Finch and Mike Curie are monitoring SpaceX's countdown activities in the control center. Josh and Mike, how are things progressing for today's launch?
Pretty well for the on-time liftoff of SpaceX CRS-12 to the International Space Station. We've had a number of milestones completed. As of now, we've had collision avoidance with the Eastern Range. We've had a checkout of the autonomous flight termination system, and we've also had the loading of fuel. So the loading of RP-1 began at T-1 hour at 11:31 a.m., and the loading of liquid oxygen began at T-35 around 11:56 a.m. And the Eastern Range confirms that it is go for launch and for landing of the Falcon 9 first stage at nearby Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, Landing Zone 1.
And U.S. Air Force 45th Weather Squadron Launch Weather Officer Mike McAleenan is briefing us that weather is cooperating today as well. We have an 80% chance of favorable weather, only a 20% chance of the possibility of violating the cumulus cloud rule or flight through precipitation rule. And frankly, he briefed the launch director, Mike Taylor, that he does not expect any change in the weather. We are currently go. He expects everything to be good through at least an hour and a half after the first stage Falcon landing. So I think we're in good shape today, Stephanie, for launch. And for now, that's it from Falcon Launch Control. Back to you.
Thanks, Josh and Mike. Coming up, we'll provide you with an update on what this mission means to NASA and the crews aboard the International Space Station. We'll hear about an investigation that could help scientists better understand the pathology of Parkinson's disease and aid in the development of future therapies. We'll also hear from the organization that manages the experiments in space and how that work creates an even brighter future for us here on Earth. Research conducted aboard the International Space Station helps advance scientific knowledge in Earth, space, physical, and biological sciences for the benefit of people living on our home planet. It also serves as the world's leading laboratory where cutting-edge research and technology development is pushing us further toward human deep space exploration back to the moon and onto Mars. Today's SpaceX launch will deliver more than 6,000 pounds of supplies and payloads, including critical materials to support dozens of the more than 250 science and research investigations that will occur during Expeditions 52 and 53. The Dragon spacecraft will spend approximately 1 month attached to the space station and then will return to Earth filled with 3,000 pounds of critical research for investigators across the nation. The International Space Station is a unique microgravity laboratory. Many research investigations, like the Parkinson's disease study, can use this particular environment to take advantage of their research. Kennedy's Amanda Griffin is joining us now to share more about how the Michael J. Fox Foundation is helping Parkinson's research. Amanda?
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm here with Dr. Marco Baptista. He's the Director of Research Programs for the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Marco, can you tell us a little bit about the foundation and why the work you do is so important?
Yeah, thank you. So the foundation was founded in 2000 with the goal of trying to find a cure for Parkinson's disease. And we have invested now over $700 million to try to find the cure. Last year, we've invested $90 million alone. And 89 cents to the dollar goes to research. So we're very committed to have an aggressive model to cure Parkinson's disease.
And how many people are affected by Parkinson's?
So the estimates are about 1 million here in the United States and approximately maybe 5 million people worldwide.
All right, so it'd be a huge impact. So we've been hearing a lot about this LRRK2 protein.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about what that is, and could this be the breakthrough that you guys have been searching for?
Yeah, so LRRK2 stands for leucine-rich repeat kinase 2. And mutations in that gene are the main genetic contributor to Parkinson's disease. So there's a very solid foundation in trying to understand the cause to Parkinson's disease. And the pharmaceutical industry is very good at making these class of drugs against these mutations. So we're hoping that this is a key protein that's involved in Parkinson's that we can target, and that's why we're trying to do this experiment on the International Space Station to try to better understand what that protein, what LRRK2 as we call it, what it looks like.
And so why does this protein being taken to microgravity on the space station, why is that helping you as opposed to just doing this research here on Earth?
Yeah, so we are doing a lot here on Earth also. We have world-class teams that are using a lot of different techniques to try to understand the atomic structure of LRRK2. But we have a great opportunity with microgravity conditions to explore one particular technique, which is crystallography, and see if we can grow crystals a little larger and more pure on the International Space Station. And because of there being a lack of sedimentation, of convection currents, we think that that's an environment that might improve the resolution of already crystals that we have here on Earth.
Well, that's excellent. That'll be excellent news for all those that are affected. And so my final question to you comes from social media. So someone tweeted and they wanted to know, why does crystallization work better in microgravity than here on Earth?
Yeah, so I think there are certain conditions that might make it grow larger and more pure. Just because it grows larger and pure doesn't necessarily mean that we'll get a higher resolution. And this is an experiment like all the other experiments that are going up. But we're hopeful that we'll be trying conditions that we've never tried before and leveraging a great collaboration with NASA and CASIS to try to improve the resolution of this protein.
Well, absolutely. Our fingers are crossed because I know a lot of people will be positively affected by this if you get the results you hope for.
Yeah,
so thank you so much for being with us today. And
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, back to you, Stephanie.
Thanks, Amanda. Today's launch from historic Launch Complex 39A is the 9th SpaceX launch from this pad. Let's review a couple quick facts about today's launch vehicle. The Falcon 9 is a full-thrust launch vehicle and a 2-stage-to-orbit rocket. It uses liquid oxygen, often referred to as LOX, and rocket-grade kerosene, known as RP-1, for its propellants. The Falcon 9 has 9 Merlin engines on the first stage and a single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage to deliver a payload, in this case the Cargo Dragon spacecraft, to the desired orbit. The approximately 26-foot-tall Dragon trunk can carry unpressurized cargo to the station, meaning the Cargo Dragon is exposed to the vacuum of space, unlike experiments inside the Dragon that are pressurized with air to simulate the atmosphere. And today, the Cargo Dragon is the only spacecraft that can return scientific research from the space station to the Earth. It's hard to keep up with just how many fascinating and life-changing experiments are being conducted by our astronauts on station. For an overview of the investigations on board the Cargo Dragon at the launch pad, let's go back to Amanda Griffin, who's standing by.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm here with Patrick O'Neill with CASIS. So can you tell us a little bit about your organization?
Sure. So CASIS stands for the Center for the Advancement of Science and Space. We manage the U.S. National Laboratory on board the International Space Station. The research that we're responsible for manifesting and brokering for SpaceX missions like this is to use the space station as a way to benefit life on Earth.
Excellent. So it seems like there are a lot of medical experiments on board today. Was that intentional?
Well, this is something that we see pretty regularly with SpaceX missions in particular. One of the reasons for that is because SpaceX has the ability to return payloads back to the researchers here on the ground. Conversely, what I would also say, too, is that we see a lot more of materials and physical science payloads that go up on our other partner, Orbital ATK. So it really helps to demonstrate the full breadth of research potential that's possible on the space station.
Excellent. So how do you choose which experiments go and when?
Right. Well, there's a couple of ways that you can submit your ideas, and first and foremost, it is to do that, to submit an idea, a concept that you would like to see be performed on the ISS National Laboratory. There's 2 ways that you can do that. One is a traditional solicitation that you often see from the research community. We do that with the likes of the National Science Foundations, the NIHs of the world. Conversely, any researcher in the United States at any point in time can submit a white paper concept that can be evaluated for our team to see if it is something that could be performed on the International Space Station.
Right, so that's what I love about CASIS. So NASA has their own experiments, and then CASIS enables all these other researchers to send their own experiments.
That's the hope.
So is there a wait time right now? Like, what is the time frame for folks who have
Well,
experiments?
we're definitely seeing a ramp-up phase, which is exactly what everyone wanted when we opened up the station and turned it into a national laboratory, was to open it up to a variety of channels that otherwise might not have had the chance to take advantage of the space station. As far as demand is concerned, in wait times, you'll see research that can go up as fast as 6 months, and sometimes it'll go up in 18 months. I mean, it really kind of depends on the full scope of the research that the investigator is looking to send.
And how many experiments has CASIS flown?
That's a great question. Off the top top of my head, I don't know the exact number, but I can tell you that this year alone, we've sent well over 100 investigations to the space station.
That's amazing. So that's so much research being done that maybe wouldn't have been done before.
Absolutely.
On board the International Space Station. So that's excellent. It's just another great example of how NASA is working off the Earth for the Earth. Thanks, Patrick. Back to you, Stephanie.
Thanks, Amanda. At about 20 minutes from today's launch, let's send it back to Josh and Mike in the control center for a quick update.
Hey Stephanie, things continue to go normally as we move toward the 12:31 liftoff of the SpaceX CRS-12 to the International Space Station. At this time, we're tracking no major issues.
That's right, and this is a collaborative effort, Josh. We have not only the teams here on the ground, but we have 6 people aboard the International Space Station awaiting the arrival of the Dragon spacecraft on Wednesday. You do have the launch control team operated by the SpaceX launch director, Mike Taylor, here at nearby Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. He's working with the partners at SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California, and also connecting with the International Space Station Mission Control Center in Houston, Texas, to oversee today's launch of the Falcon 9 rocket. So it truly is a team effort spanning the U.S. from the East Coast to the West Coast. Looking at the control center and mission control, Houston. So with that, we will send things back to Stephanie Martin from Falcon Launch Control. We're at T-minus 20 minutes and counting.
Thanks, Josh and Mike. NASA's Commercial Crew Program has contracts with Boeing and SpaceX to launch our astronauts to the International Space Station from right here along Florida's Space Coast. Both companies plan test flights of their spacecraft systems to the International Space Station just next year. The addition of Boeing's CST-100 Starliner and SpaceX's Crew Dragon to the manifest of spacecraft heading to the station raises more than just opportunity for astronauts to fly aboard American spacecraft. It also increases the amount of science and broadens the research that can be performed aboard the orbiting laboratory. That's because the new generation of human-rated spacecraft are being designed to carry time-critical science to and from the space station along with the astronauts. The spacecraft will also aid in the goal of establishing and maintaining a crew of 7 astronauts, which could increase the research time in microgravity. Mission planners anticipate that increasing the crew size by 1 person on the U.S. segment could effectively double the amount of time dedicated to scientific research each week. So get ready to watch astronauts launch from Kennedy Space Center once again. You don't want to miss it. Investigations conducted aboard the International Space Station are not limited to seasoned researchers. The Genes in Space competition is a collaborative effort between Boeing, Mini-PCR, and others, including CASIS. The competition calls upon students in grades 7 through 12 to propose their own DNA-based research that could be selected and sent to space. Amanda Griffin recently caught up with a very special student whose award-winning experiment is launching on this mission.
I'm here with Alia Al-Mansuri. She is the Genes in Space competition winner from the United Arab Emirates. Thanks for joining us today, Alia.
Thank you.
So I know this competition is very new, but you were the first UAE winner. How does that feel?
Feels great. I'm making my country proud.
You came all the way from Dubai? Was this your first time to the United States?
I've actually lived in Virginia for around 2 years, but I don't really remember any of it. I was just 2 years old.
Right.
Yeah.
So is it pretty exciting to watch your experiment launch to the space station, huh?
Yeah, it is pretty exciting.
Speaking of your experiment, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in protecting the body from the inside out rather than the outside in. So from like radiation and instead of wearing a suit. So I found out about something called heat shock proteins. These proteins are made by the body to protect the body from heat. And so because there's large amounts of radiation in space, I want to see if these heat shock proteins will also be made. And so the first step to do that is to see if the gene that makes these heat shock proteins is being turned on. And so that's what my experiment does.
So back up, you're 14, right?
Just turned 15 last week.
Well, happy birthday. So how does a newly turned 15-year-old get excited about this? How did you first get interested in this?
I guess I've always been interested in aliens and science fiction, and I guess that's how I got interested into space and understanding what's out there and specifically how we can react to what's in space.
And so how long did it take you? How long have you worked on this experiment?
It's about last year, October last year, and yeah, I'm still working on it today, so it's an ongoing process.
How cool is it that astronauts are going to be conducting your experiment aboard the International Space Station?
It's crazy. I want to be an astronaut when I grow up, so that's amazing that I get to actually see astronauts doing my experiments in space.
Right? Are you like the coolest kid in school now? Like, do you get any special passes at home, like no chores or anything like that?
Still doing chores, sadly, but
I have to talk to your mom about that. So, any plans for future experiments?
Hopefully, yeah. After seeing what happens to these heat shock proteins and if we can detect genes turning on in space, maybe we can go forward into studying differences that happen to their expression.
So you said you want to be an astronaut when you grow up, and do you think competitions like this, help prepare you for that?
Yeah, actually, I want to be one of the first astronauts to go to Mars. So it's a big thing to dream about, but there's no impossible. I mean, I'm only 15 and I'm sending my experiment to space, and so
exactly.
There's no impossible.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And we look forward to seeing your experiment being conducted on the International Space Station.
Thank you.
The Genes in Space program is really a spectacular competition that really engages young students. It's great to see the research that they've come up with. As you can see, we've got crowds gathering just along the beach to watch today's SpaceX CRS-12 mission to the International Space Station. The Dragon spacecraft and the Falcon 9 are prepared at the launch pad and ready to go for a 12:31 p.m. Eastern launch. At this time, we're going to go to Mike and Josh in the Control Center for a quick update on how we're progressing with today's launch.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Things continue to progress pretty well. The T-minus time is just about 13 minutes, 30 seconds as we progress toward liftoff of SpaceX CRS-12 to the International Space Station. Weather continues to be favorable with only a 20% chance of violation due to the cumulus cloud rule and flight through precipitation.
And as we get closer to launch, we'll be tuning into the countdown net that the network of SpaceX launch controllers uses to communicate with each other. You'll hear the voices of LD, Launch Director Mike Taylor, LC, Launch Conductor Ty Morton, CE, Chief Engineer Bala Ralamurthy, and VC, Vehicle Controller John Colosimo, who will be calling out some of the happenings, including the strong back retracting, the Dragon and Falcon 9 going to internal power, vehicle and startup, and all that happening within the final moments of the countdown. So as Josh said, they're working no technical issues at this time. We're at T-minus 12 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. From Falcon Launch Control, we'll send it back to you, Stephanie.
Thanks, guys. Installed inside the Cargo Dragon spacecraft at the launch pad is an experiment that will use microgravity to test strategies for growing new lung tissue and assist Earth-based efforts to develop complex bioengineered tissue that can be used to repair damaged organs or reduce organ rejection.
We've created a model of the human lung that has most of the cells in it that a lung would have, and we're going to use this model to evaluate what happens to your lung on long-term spaceflight. We're using stem and progenitor cells. They're the cells that give rise to the cells that allow you to have gas exchange and breathe. The larger mission is to eventually someday be able to, instead of make pieces this big, is to make a lung this big for transplantation for somebody. If you're going to look at what atoms do, that affects a molecule, that alters a cell, that changes how a tissue responds, that alters how an organ functions, that changes how you function, you have to be able to walk it back and say, I can look at it at these small levels and build this picture of what's happening in a person. That all may be very different in space because microgravity influences everything that a cell does. And the opportunity to have a chance to send an experiment to space and get data back is huge for a scientist. It happens once in your lifetime.
Today's launch from historic Launch Complex 39A is scheduled for 12:31 p.m. Eastern. At the time of launch, the space station will be flying 253 miles above the Atlantic Ocean, just southeast of Nova Scotia. Today's SpaceX launch will deliver more than 6,000 pounds of supplies and payloads, including critical materials to support dozens of the more than 250 science and research investigations that will occur during Expeditions 52 and 53. We'd like to welcome those of you just joining us on Facebook Live. Here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida, the Falcon 9 rocket and the Dragon spacecraft are poised to lift off for an instantaneous launch window at 12:31 p.m. Eastern from Launch Complex 39A. Research conducted aboard the International Space Station helps advance scientific knowledge in Earth, space, physical, and biological sciences for the benefit of people living on our home planet. It also serves as the world's leading laboratory where cutting-edge research and technology development is pushing us further toward human deep space exploration missions back to the moon and onto Mars. At T-minus 9 minutes and counting, we're closing in on the final activities leading toward today's launch at 12:31 p.m. Eastern. Let's go back to Josh and Mike in the Control Center for more.
Thank you, Stephanie. And as we've mentioned before, for those of you that are just joining us on Facebook, things are progressing pretty well. We're tracking no major issues at this time, and the weather continues to be favorable. We have about a 20% chance of violation, which means that we're 80% go for launch. The only thing that we have is the cumulus cloud rule and the flight through precipitation.
And our launch weather officer, Mike McAleenan, has briefed the team that he really doesn't expect to invoke either of those rules as we get closer to launch. At this time, everything appears to be clear in the launch area and is expected to continue that way, Josh.
Right now, the launch director, Mike Taylor, has verified the launch and first stage landing areas are cleared of personnel that happened at about T-minus 38 minutes. The range coordinator verified the eastern range is go for launch and landing of the first stage. That began at T-minus 38 minutes. And the Dragon controller has verified the Dragon launch terminal count auto sequence has started, and that was at about T-minus 35 minutes. We've also the loading of fuel, so RP1 fueling of both the Falcon 9 stages began on time at T-minus 1 hour, and the loading of liquid oxygen began flowing into both rocket stages as planned at T-minus 35 minutes. After launch, Falcon 9's two stages will propel Dragon to a speed of 17,500 miles per hour in just about 9 minutes, starting a journey that will culminate with a rendezvous at the space station on Wednesday. While in the vicinity of the ISS, station astronauts will be in direct communication with the Dragon, monitoring the spacecraft and issuing spacecraft commands. After completing checkout procedures, Dragon will receive approval to gradually begin approaching the ISS from the radial direction, that's toward the Earth. Expedition 52 flight engineers Jack Fisher of NASA and Paolo Nespoli of the European Space Agency will begin grappling Dragon using the space station's robotic arm. Controllers at Mission Control in Houston will operate the robot arm aboard the station to move Dragon into position at the berthing point where it will be locked into place. Dragon will stay at the space station until approximately September 17, when it will return to Earth packed with research items and parachute to a landing in the Pacific Ocean.
We're at T-minus 6 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. And just a few seconds ago, the Falcon 9 Merlin engines were chilled in preparation for the super cold liquid oxygen and RP-1 propellants that will flow through them at liftoff. And the Dragon spacecraft went to internal power. Coming up at T-minus 5 minutes, 15 seconds, the TTEB engine ignition system will be pressurized. It uses triethyl aluminum triethylborane, or TTEB, to ignite the 9 Merlin engines. TTEB is pyrophoric, lighting spontaneously on contact with air, unlike some other engines that use electric spark ignition rather than this chemical starter. At T-minus 5 minutes, the launch team will perform communication checks with the Eastern Range. 30 seconds later, at T-minus 4 minutes, 30 seconds, the Strongback, which stands side by side with the Falcon 9 to provide power and connections for RP-1, liquid oxygen, and helium, will retract to the launch position of 88.3 degrees. At 2 minutes 55 seconds from launch, the Falcon 9 Stage 2 thrust vector control actuators will move the second stage Merlin vacuum engine to verify its ability to control the spacecraft in flight. And within the last 3 minutes of the countdown, Stage 1 and Stage 2 liquid oxygen loading will be complete to flight levels. About 2 minutes 45 seconds before launch, the Strongback will reach its launch position, canted away from the rocket at 88.3 degrees. 2 minutes away from launch, the Air Force Range Control Officer will confirm the physical safety of the launch and landing areas and Eastern Range, and the Falcon 9 will be verified to be on internal power. T-minus 1 minute 5 seconds, the autonomous flight termination system will be verified ready to launch. And 1 minute away from launch, the flight computer begins its final pre-launch checks. Propellant tanks are pressurized to flight pressure, and both the Dragon spacecraft and the Falcon 9 rocket will be configured for launch startup mode. And as you heard, the Strongback lower sequence has started. Vehicle controller John Colosimo confirming that. Our final poll will be at T-minus 45 seconds when Launch Director Mike Taylor will check with Mission Control in Houston and the launch team at SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California. And then he will poll the team here at the SpaceX Launch Control Center and give a final go for launch. That's at T-minus 45 seconds. We're just under 4 minutes away from launch at this point. The terminal count begins at T-minus 30 seconds. 18 seconds before liftoff, the launch pad's water deluge system, which is called Niagara, will be activated. Over 600,000 gallons per minute of water will flow through Rainbirds, Firex, and the deluge system in order to suppress the acoustic waves that radiate from the engine plumes and counter the effect of the vibration on the rocket. 3 seconds before launch, the TTEB will flow, igniting the 9 Merlin engines of the first stage, and then at T0, at T0, the rocket computer commands the launch mount to release the vehicle for flight, and the Falcon 9 will lift off, putting out over 1.7 million pounds of thrust, which is more than 747 jets at full power. We're about 3 minutes away from launch.
88.3 degrees.
And you hear the Strongback is in the launch position.
And you're looking at live views from the Kennedy Space Center. For SpaceX CRS-12, the Falcon 9 sits on the launch pad with a Dragon packed with supplies for the International Space Station. After launch, SpaceX ascent commentary is performed by several people. The propulsion engineer will call out propulsion events. The avionics engineer will call out avionics, health, and Dragon separation. The range coordinator calls out Air Force Satellite Control Network acquisition and loss of signal, and the ground station specialists calls out the SpaceX antenna acquisition and loss of signal. At 1 minute 6 seconds after liftoff, Falcon 9 reaches supersonic speed. The vehicle will pass through the area of maximum aerodynamic pressure, known as max Q, 2 seconds later. This is the point when mechanical stress on the rocket reaches its peak because of the rocket's velocity and resistance created by Earth's atmosphere.
We're at T-minus
Stage 2
2
lock
minutes
load closed
and
out.
counting. Stage 2 LOX load is closed out. The second stage of the Falcon 9 engine is fully ready with liquid oxygen. RP1 has been loaded aboard both stages, as has liquid oxygen. We're in the final minute, 45 seconds away from launch, Josh. Everything appears to be go at this time. The next major milestone will be a checkout of the
Self-align.
automatic or autonomous flight control system, and that will come a minute and 5 seconds away from launch.
Ground side gas closeouts have started.
After liftoff, around 2 minutes 27 seconds into flight, the 9 Merlin engines will sequentially shut down. You'll hear MECO, which is main engine cutoff. The first stage will perform a boost back burn about 15 seconds later, heading back to nearby Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, landing zone 1. We'll show you the landing on NASA TV about 7.5 minutes after launch.
Dragon are in startup. Falcon 9's in startup.
Dragon is in startup.
Gas closeouts complete.
Everything is go, under 1 minute. Standing by for the final go from the launch director at T-minus 45 seconds, Josh.
LD verify, go for launch. Go for launch.
And Mike Taylor, our launch director, is go for launch. Terminal count begins at T-minus 30 seconds.
T-minus 30. T-minus 20. Falcon 9 is configured for flight. T-minus 10.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The liftoff of the Falcon 9 takes flight with the Dragon spacecraft, destined for the one-of-a-kind laboratory in microgravity, the International Space Station.
And the Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
39A to form the launch pad post-launch operations. Copy, will go.
Live from Falcon 9 to go transonic at a minute 6 seconds after liftoff.
2 seconds
shortly
later.
thereafter by
2 seconds later, we'll go through max Q, which is the maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle.
Power telemetry nominal.
standing by for Falcon 9 to go transonic.
Passing through max Q.
And we've just heard the cue for that. The vehicle has gone through max Q.
Next major milestone will be the shutdown of the 9 Merlin engines, scheduled for 2 minutes 27 seconds into flight. Less than a minute away from main engine cutoff.
MVAC engine chill has begun.
After our main engine cutoff, the first stage will perform a boost back burn about 15 seconds later and head back to nearby Cape Canaveral Air Force Station landing zone 1. And on NASA television, we'll be showing you the first stage landing as well as the continuation of the second stage taking Dragon to orbit.
Station 1 jettison will begin at 2 minutes 29 seconds.
Vehicle flying down the nominal. We have MECO.
And we have MECO.
Stage
main engine
separation
cutoff.
confirmed.
You can see the stage separation. Stage 1 on the right, drifting back away from Stage 2, continuing to power Dragon into space. This view from the
Second stage ignition.
This view from the second stage of the Falcon 9 showing the engine has ignited. And that's the first stage, heading back toward the ground, just miles away from the launch pad. First stage is conducting a boost burn. About 10 seconds remaining in that burn.
Dragon nose cone deploy.
Meanwhile, the Dragon nose cone has deployed, exposing the
Trajectory
Dragon
nominal.
spacecraft to space.
Boost back shutdown.
Boost back burn shutdown. This view again from the second stage. Everything proceeding normally with both first and second stage operations of the Falcon 9. First stage continues to fly
Acquisition
upward,
of signal, Bermuda.
reaching its apogee in about 10 seconds before it makes its descent toward Earth. About 4.5 minutes after launch, everything continues normally. The second stage engine will continue burning for about another 5 minutes. Falcon 9 first stage, counting down toward its entry burn in about a minute and a half. You can see thrusters firing to control the first stage as it makes its way back toward Earth. Once again, to land at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station Landing Zone 1, accompanied by a sonic boom for those who are in the area. Five and a half minutes after launch, everything continues to go normally for the Falcon 9 first stage and for the second stage and Dragon spacecraft.
Have acquisition at New Hampshire.
New Hampshire tracking station, now tracking the vehicle. Less than 30 seconds away from the first stage entry burn. Landing of the first stage, scheduled in about 1 minute, 45 seconds. And we have the entry burn underway. And the entry burn has ended.
Shutdown.
Stage 2 still on nominal trajectory.
Stage 2 still on course for its rendezvous with the International Space Station. Stage 2 engine cutoff about 2.5 minutes away from now. Stage 1 about to come back subsonic. About 45 seconds away from landing.
Transonic.
Stage 1 is transonic. Landing burn about to begin.
S1 landing burn.
Landing legs will be deployed in about 15 seconds. And a sonic boom felt throughout the Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Air Force Station area as Falcon 9 first stage
Landing legs deploy.
Returns to Cape Canaveral Air Force Station Landing Zone 1.
LZ1, the Falcon has landed. Landing operators move into procedure 11.100, section 3 on LZ1 net.
Meanwhile, Dragon spacecraft, powered by the Falcon 9 second stage, continues on its way to orbit with a second stage engine cutoff expected in about 1 minute. Everything is proceeding per the timeline. 40 seconds away from second stage engine cutoff.
Stage 2 is under terminal guidance.
Stage 2 AFTS is saved.
Nine minutes after launch, everything continues to go well. Second stage burn is about to end, and spacecraft separation about 1 minute away.
Yes, Seco.
Seco, second stage engine cutoff confirmed.
GNC confirms good orbit insertion.
Guidance, Navigation, and Control Officer confirms good orbit insertion.
Dragon separation confirmed. Dragon is on its way to the International Space Station.
And Dragon is on its way to the International Space Station. Looking inside the Mission Control Center in Hawthorne, California, where SpaceX is headquartered. Great mission so far. The Dragon is on its way to the space station, controlled by the International Space Station Control Center in Houston, Texas. Standing by for solar array deploy of the Dragon spacecraft.
Dragon separation confirmed.
And there's Dragon separation. That will be followed by the solar array deploy in about a minute. Ten and a half minutes after launch. Stage 1 back on the ground. Stage 2 just deploying the Dragon spacecraft toward the International Space Station. Flight controllers in Mission Control Houston monitoring today's launch and the flight of Dragon as it makes its way toward a Wednesday rendezvous with the International Space Station with a grapple plan for approximately 7 a.m. Eastern Time. Six crew members aboard the International Space Station waiting for the rendezvous and for the contents of the Dragon spacecraft that will help them pursue science and provide them with resupply as well.
Dragon's propulsion system has successfully primed and thrusters are ready for firing. Dragon is in solar array deploy.
And solar array deploy is underway aboard the Dragon spacecraft. So everything is going normally today. Good launch, good spacecraft separation, and now solar array deploy, Josh.
And as Dragon unfurls its solar wings, the spacecraft continues its journey to the International Space Station. Dragon will arrive at the station on Wednesday. NASA television coverage will begin at 5:30 a.m. for the expected capture at 7 a.m.
And so with the successful launch and deploy of the Dragon and its journey to the International Space Station underway, that will wrap up our coverage from Falcon Launch Control. And we will now return to Stephanie Martin. Stephanie?
Thanks, Josh and Mike. And this concludes our launch coverage of the Falcon 9 and Dragon spacecraft. For more information about the International Space Station, please visit www.nasa.gov/station. And for more information about the SpaceX CRS-12 mission, visit www.nasa.gov/SpaceX. And don't forget to tune in to our post-launch news conference on NASA television at 2 p.m. I'm Stephanie Martin. Thanks for joining us, and we will leave you with replays of the launch.
Post-launch operations.
Copy, we'll go. Power to launch nominal.
Nine, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The liftoff of the Falcon 9 takes flight with the Dragon spacecraft, destined for the one-of-a-kind laboratory in microgravity, the International Space Station.
And the Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
39A to perform the launch pad post-launch operations.
Copy, we'll go.
Standing by for the Falcon 9 to go transonic at 1:06 after liftoff.
2
Followed
seconds
shortly
later.
thereafter by
2 seconds later, we'll go through max Q, which is the maximum dynamic pressure on the vehicle.
pad post-launch operations.
Copy, will go.
Pad post-launch operations.
Copy, will go.
Power to launch nominal. Passing through max Q. Vehicle is supersonic.
MVAC engine chill has begun.
Ten.
Launch pad post-launch operations.
Copy, will go.
Power to launch nominal. Passing through max Q. Vehicle is supersonic.
MVAC engine chill has begun.
Landing legs deploy. LZ-1, the Falcon has landed. Landing operators move into procedure 11.100, section 3 on LZ-1 net.